do you care about?
Yeah, so we're at an age where people are noticing whether or not you are having diversity within your content. And it's not just noticing passively, it's noticing actively. They are holding companies accountable. They are making sure that customers, as in they, are making sure that they feel seen within a company's branding before they go and start to invest in companies and the work that they're doing. I think it's also important because we're moving away from the conversation around like what is tall and white and skinny happens to be the main thing that is what's popular, and actually bringing in the diversity of our bodies, of our, of our backgrounds, of our abilities, of our languages, of where we are geographically, things like that. All of those are able to come to the forefront. And I think it's incredibly important that we make sure that we're representing each of those pieces of people's identities within the space. It's almost like we're taking a journey with our customers to tell their stories and to represent them. And now companies have the responsibilities to do that in a positive and enlightening way.
Alicia, Christian, do you want to add on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shayna did a great job of covering where we are in the moment, and I think it's important to think about where we used to be, right? Because it used to be good enough to have a sprinkle to say you could check that box. You've included a person from this category. But where we are now is really an opportunity to be able to share a holistic viewpoint of communities that have been seen as monoliths, right? So we get to show now that all Black women are not the same, that, differently abled people want different things at different times. And so I think really opening up the conversation to reflect who we are as a community and different communities and how we actually relate to one another. It's an exciting place to be, but it is also somewhere where we get to really dive in and think about it and have these conversations and work together to be representative.
Absolutely.
Yep. I echo the same sentiments. You guys pretty much covered it. We all know the inclusion train is something trendy right now. Everyone's kind of trying to get their bit in. But I think it also shows how people of color can be in existence. Like we can see, oh, they see us, we're seen now. Even as an example for anyone who dances or knows about this, skin colored materials and tights and ballet, all of those things, that's a new development. So even things like that, that's super exciting. It's kind of sad that it took this long, but we're here now. For a long time, we've been looking at the media and it's one certain particular thing in different variations of that thing. So to see little Black girls or little Black boys be able to look at television, magazines, different things like that, and see afros and natural hairstyles and locks and things like that in the media, I think that's super important. And even as a personal example in my work life, just really quick, I'm not gonna ramble too much, but I worked at a very popular hotel company as a social media coordinator. So I was over the brand pages, the mainstream brand pages, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And I had to choose those images. I had to make those captions. That was me. I was like 21, like trying to find Black people on, Getty Images. It was a hot mess. And I was in those rooms where I had to present to senior leadership, like, this is what we're going to post for the month. And it was uncomfortable. It was like, you could tell the energy in the room. Nobody looked like me. So every time they saw like my content calendar, it was like, you could tell they were uncomfortable by the amount of Black people that I would forcibly search in place.
Yep, that's what happens.
In the content calendar. It's like,
oh my goodness.
I tried to make it even, like, okay, we've posted enough non-Black people of color. Let's find some Black people. So that was pretty uncomfortable for me, but I encourage anyone who's in that position to take advantage of it. I don't know what they're posting now on their pages, on the mainstream pages. I'm sure they went back to what they were doing. But if I can move the needle in any type of way or make people think differently or make people consider differently in any type of way, I'm going to do that. So super important, all that to say. So yeah.
You nailed it. And perfect segue, because like we've talked about, I've put together a couple of examples with you guys as inspiration of what it looks like when this is done really well. And let's see if my computer will actually behave. Yes. All right. So I'll let you guys walk through some of these examples and talk about what some of these brands are doing and why we think they're doing it well. I'll because you're at the top of the screen, Alicia, I'll start with you. I'll let you go ahead, or you guys can just open it up and discuss.
I would love to take Target. So I'm a mom, a typical millennial mom, in that Target is my second home. So I think this is a great place to start, because one of the things we were talking about with Target as an example of how to get it right is that it's not just a one-off campaign. They've really integrated diversity and inclusion into their business model. And so it's felt, you feel it when you're at Target, you feel it when you're on Target's online social properties, you feel it when you get products from Target, the displays, whether it's Black History Month or Lunar New Year, different things are being highlighted all the time. And just as an example, I have young boys and they're growing, so I had to get some deodorant for my oldest little. And there's a brand at Target that doesn't have all of the aluminum and chemicals. It's called Play Pits, but it was a Black mom created for her Black son. And so I was dropping my kids off at school and told my son, I'm going to be picking this up for you. When you get home from school, we'll talk about putting on deodorant. And I called him Sunshine. And when I went to go get this brand from Target, Sunshine, S-O-N, Shine, is one of the scents on this deodorant. So he said, hey, Mom, that's the same thing you said to me. Did you get that from the deodorant? I was like, no, it's just cool enough that this deodorant is also made by another Black mom who loves her sons too. So same words. So it's really cool to be able to have those examples in real life. And I think that if you're struggling, Target is a great place to start, just consuming their content to see how you can kind of naturally integrate. And obviously they have a huge team. But yeah, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, for sure. They're one of my favorites and continue to impress me year after year because they're so deliberate about it.
Very intentional.
The next one we'll start with, head towards, it's Nike. Who's taking this one?
I'll take this one really quickly. And, I don't really need to speak too much about this one. We all kind of know that they've always been super open, super inclusive, especially as it relates to what an athlete looks like. And it's not, the typical idea of an athlete. They have paraplegic athletes featured in their ads, featured in some of these photo shoots, not this one in particular, but I love how they feature all women of color in this particular image that was chosen. And like I said, they've always been this way. So I definitely had to include Nike on one of these good examples.
How do you think Nike got here?
That is a good question. I'm trying to think of their history, if I even remember.
I have an idea.
Yeah, help me
I
out.
think that they were responsive to their sales. I think that they started to dig into who was buying their products and respond to the aspirational aspect of Nike. And, you know, especially back in the 90s, athletes of color, Nike was that we made it moment. So they got responsive to that. And I feel like really dialed up their intention around their branding and images in response to who was actually buying their products.
Yeah, and I have some assumption it has some big impact on their bottom line.
Yeah, their lead DEI person is a Black woman, and she has been incredibly transparent, especially the last few years, about the fact that like they've gone public with like their diversity numbers, as well as the impact that they've done internally at Nike and the goals that they've set that go all the way out to 2025, and how the company's taken a more holistic approach and learning development and things like that. So they're starting to do the work, not only just in like the stuff that you would check the boxes of like a basic DEI work, but also like ingraining it in every part of the work that they're doing at Nike, which I think is great. Like they're not all the way there yet. I don't think many companies are, but they're definitely one of the more outspoken about it. And I think that's great.
All right, here's another example. I think Fenty is a super interesting example because I think they're one of the few that probably opened and started their organization leading with diversity. And so I'll step back, whoever wants to kind of talk through this.
I chose Fenty too, y'all. Sorry. But of course,
yeah, she has examples.
of course, Rihanna did her thing as far as listening to the issues that people were complaining about. She didn't just come out with a new product and ignore everything that was going on social media. She was quickly able to see the different shades were limited, especially for darker skinned women. So I think that's super important as it relates to intracommunal diversity, even outside of non-Black people of color, when we're talking about Black people as well. Having those spaces being seen and having those shades so they can participate and have all those things that everyone else has. So yeah, that was just my example for a good job. Well done.
There we go. And is this, Chris, is this yours or is this?
This is mine again, y'all. I just
do it. Do it.
Shameless plug for my
shameless plug. Very good.
For my friends, she created a hub for marketers, influencers, women of color, and the Instagram page is Creative Girl Connect. And as you can see, there are different shades of people and people of color included on some of her posts, but also plus size women. So I think that's super important as well when we're talking about what does beauty look like? What does the influencer look like? You know what I'm saying? And kind of changing that narrative as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And that's probably a really good segue to bad example. So I want to preface this by saying that I think that it's beneficial for people to try. I think it's also beneficial to have the right people in the room. And so I'll let you guys kind of walk through some of these bad examples. The thought behind this is like, there are some learnings here of things that they tried and didn't work and why they didn't work, and how you can stay away from these mistakes, because they're tempting, of course, but not, you know, I'll let you guys explain.
Yeah, really quickly, I'll just start off with Coach. And like you just said in preface, they tried, they did their very best. But I think it is a bit inauthentic, just my humble opinion. And I kind of did a before and after with these screenshots, how their Instagram feed looked one way one day, and then literally you woke up and it was like all Black people or all people of color on their page. Like literally go on their Instagram right now, you will not find a white person. So, so I think they tried to hop on a trend. As you can see, they included a lot of Lil Nas X. They included a super popular influencer named Ricky. And it's like, okay, thank you for including these people and, you know, having them in your designer campaigns. But at the same time, these people were going viral years ago. You know, where were their brand deals then? Where was their, you know, videos about your bags then? So I just wanted to include this one really quickly.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Identifying a trend shouldn't be a starting point. Like identifying a place we get to lean in and listen. So some of the things that I coach people on when talking about content is understanding if you're not a member of an underrepresented community, your conversation point starts with listening every time. So you can't just jump into a conversation and say, oh, people are talking about that thing, let's talk about it too. First, you get to listen and get some understanding. And then maybe next, bring some of those authentic voices into your table, in a role or as a consultant. And then you can start to be a part of the conversation. But just identifying, hey, they're having that conversation over there, let's jump in it. I mean, you wouldn't do that in an actual room of people talking. So we don't get to do that in our social media content either, right? So I think that's a good place to think about how to approach starting a conversation.
I think that's a good segue into kind of the question around what are some of the things that you should, what are some of the other things you should definitely avoid when you're going down this path, especially if you don't have people of color, anybody in the LGBT community in your room? How do you start down this path if you don't know what you're doing?
You pay the person that should be in the room. Like you go and bring in consultants and the folks that can do the work and pay them is always the first step. I think
one more time for the
like I just want to make sure that other people know. If you're saying that nobody is in your room, that means that you need to go back and review your hiring practices and what is happening there, because clearly something needs to be changed. And then if you don't have the time to get that in as quickly as possible, you go out and you pay consultants who have the experience, and then you listen to them when they give you the suggestions and items that you should be working on. I think folks are always trying to be like, well, how do we do that if we don't have this person in the room? It's like, you have to look internally first and then work on that. Like you shouldn't even be trying to have that be your first step. You should go back and look at why don't we have these people in the room? Why aren't these people here working with us? And go from there. And that's where companies just need to recognize like, oh, this campaign can wait because clearly there are bigger issues that have to be worked on.
Is that happening?
I think it's beginning to happen, right? We can find examples and hype them up as do this, they're doing this, just like Shayna was sharing about Nike and what they're doing and being transparent and saying, hey, we're not there yet, but here are our goals and here when we hope to reach them. So it's beginning to be done. And hopefully as bigger companies lean in and we get word of it, they can be the example. And, like Shayna did, we can continue to keep everyone accountable as to how it is that it should be happening.
Chris, what else? What should we not be doing?
I think we talked about this a little bit at the top, but we definitely want to reiterate kind of the pandering approach, because I think that's what a lot of these brands are doing in a quick haste to try to become trendy or try not to look like the bad guy. So I definitely want to give an example of that. Like Fashion Nova, love them, but also you can tell it's a pandering type of approach with their email subject lines. It's not like, okay, 20% off sale. Okay, cool. They're like, it's lit, 20% out. Like it's very forced and like you can tell they're trying to talk to a certain type of person, but it's just coming out very forced. Yes, cringy. Thank you. I do not remember them doing that when they first came out, when they first launched their brand. So definitely want to reiterate that. Any of the brands that participated in the Black Square, I forgot, was that 2021 or 2020?
2020.
Yeah, the years.
I was there.
But after a few weeks, a lot of those companies deleted that. Or after a few days, they deleted that. And you know, they were talking about Black Lives Matter or Black History Month, and that slowly starts to fade away. So anytime for me, anytime there's like a easy come, easy go type of thing going on, and you have to really pay attention to those brands to know that, and pay attention to what they're posting and what fades away after a while. Yes, I see someone in the comments talk about the difference of pandering and authentic engagement. And I'll let everyone else chime in on this too, but I think for me, pandering is forcing certain language, forcing an influx of people of color or Black people within your branding where you once didn't include them at all. And it's just kind of like an inauthentic approach for me. I feel like when the inclusion suddenly begins and then suddenly ends, that's like, okay, you're clearly trying to talk to somebody real quick, and then you're going to leave us alone. So that's my definition of pandering, instead of just being authentic and engaging. If you see something cool from a person of color, something or someone Black, and you want to use like UGC, user generated content, and you want to repost them, that's different. That's like, oh, this is just a cool post. This is not because they're Black. It's not because they trended on TikTok, you know? So I think that's more so authentic in your positioning.
So I have a question.
Yes.
What if you have pulled the trigger, you've done something, and what if you're coach and you've done it wrong? What next? What do you do?
I'll answer first and I'll pass it. I think I recognize the importance of swift and sincere apologies. That's all I ask. Of course, you're not gonna get it right all the time, especially if those people aren't in the room, like you all just mentioned. But I think it's important to be sincere in your apologies and really recognize moments where you were culturally insensitive or different things like that. But I just need the swift and sincere apology and then try again. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's important to not minimize, because it doesn't have to be, we failed here and so we're stopping. But at least, you know, like to your point, we missed the mark, or we could do better, or we're going to initiate these action steps and bring these forward so that we can do better. But the acknowledgement gets to happen. Like to your point, you cannot skip acknowledging that something was not done as well as it could have been or should have been. And in doing that, you know, you open the floor for people to see everyone makes mistakes. But if you want to really build a relationship with communities, then you get to think about how best to move forward so that they don't feel othered in what you're doing.
That's a great note. And I think that that's a good segue into kind of my next question. If you want to do this, like this, if you don't have the people in your room and you haven't hired them yet, and I think that the answer to the question is where do you start is to hire them. But after next step, where do you start? Where do you even start to consider your mix of imagery, your mix of content? Alicia.
Yeah, I think definitely, like I was saying earlier, you get to listen before you try to start engaging in the talking part of a conversation. So if that gets to be some market research or bringing those consultants, to Shayna's point earlier, on board, that doesn't mean you have to start necessarily right away putting them to work creating content. You could start with, what are we missing? Like open up our blind spots to what we could be doing better. It could be informational. So starting with listening, finding out facts. I write copy, so I'm always thinking about the fact that, you know, they say good are good readers. It's the same in social content. So consume a bit more, right? See what's out there. Look up certain hashtags of the things that you're interested in and see what the conversations that already exist are. So you have a full picture of where you get to fit in into those conversations. And so doing an inclusivity audit is a good place to start. And I know that in the deck that you've put together, which everybody will get later, that there are resources for where to begin on doing an audit on what kind of content you're already putting out there. And I would also advise, don't just think about pictures, think about the way that you are wording captions, think about, you know, like Christian said, your email subject lines, the copy in your email, even something as simple as not saying you guys all the time when you have a, you know, audience of people who may not necessarily want to be identified as a guy. It's simple enough, but you can start to listen and find those places for reflecting the world as it is today, right? Because that's really the point. You want people to come in and not feel like they don't belong in your brand. So I think that's a good place. And anybody else who wants to jump in to add to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that listening piece. To get started, you have to go and talk to people who are engaging with your brand and see what they're looking for. You're not going to go and asking like, oh, what photos would you like resonate with most and things like that, because it's almost like you're telling them to build your content without, again, then paying them, because then that they become a consultant at that point. If you're going out and doing field research, you're kind of getting the background story of like, you know, why are you interested in this brand? Like, what do we bring for you? How do we best support you in like your day-to-day? What problems are we solving for you and things like that? And then you're going to build off of those conversations. That's when you go and build those personas. That's when you go and figure out what those storylines are. That's when you start to pick out who the inspiration pieces are based off of that, and then go and test it. I think a lot of these companies don't like skip a lot of these steps. They either don't go and talk to the people who engage with them, or they don't go and test it ahead of time, especially when we're talking about these bigger companies. And as Kemi was asking, like, do you think it's better to try and fail miserably than to not try at all? There are steps you can take to make sure that you don't fail miserably, but a lot of people want to jump to the end and say, we have to get this out here quick. And the quickness is going to set you up for failure. And when we were speaking on to what Christian was talking about earlier with the pandering and being authentic, I had mentioned the being reactive instead of proactive. If you go and sit and actually make this a part of your plan, strategize for it, build out what you need to, and then put it out to the world, there's a much less chance that you're going to fail. Or it's just going to be like a little bit of a sting, and then you make the adjustments and you don't do it again. But if you just jump to being reactive and catching on to the moment, like what happened in 2020 with the black squares and the companies that mentioned that they were donating. If you saw that, somebody put out an article towards the end of last year where it was like, oh, we had millions of dollars that said they were going to be donated, and less than $500,000 actually was. It was like an incredibly small amount compared to like what was promised. And so those things are the things that fall short. So if you actually are intentional about the work that you're doing, that is when the work is going to happen. But if you're going to continue to be reactive, or you're going to continue to work in a panic to say like, oh my God, we're going to lose this customer base, you probably didn't have that customer base to work with in the first place. So you have to do the work to be able to bring those people in.
Preach. Anyway, well, I mean, actually, this is a great segue. So Shayna, I wanted you to share any closing messages. I know that you work on a project that's near and dear to my heart. So I'd love for you to share what HubSpot's doing and where you feel like things are successful there.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard of HubSpot, HubSpot is a CRM, or a customer relationship management software, that basically helps you grow your business better. And it gives access to being able to do a lot of things that usually take huge teams, but we've built a software that as you're growing and starting off, you may not need those teams. It allows you to do it a lot easier, because not all of us are engineers or marketers and things like that. The side that I work on at HubSpot with that is I have two different areas. So one, we have our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging communities. So we are building and growing communities that are specific for historically excluded, but realistically currently excluded professionals, and being able to provide free and accessible resources. But our key goal is to focus around closing that social gap. The social gap is the number one thing that prevents like Black professionals from succeeding. It blocks wealth, it blocks opportunity, it blocks all of the things that we should be able to do. If you think about it in the sense of, you see stories of like white men who maybe have like 50% of what's on that resume and are still getting these high up jobs because they know somebody who knew somebody who suggested them. We don't have those somebodies that are in those positions to mention that. So when I talk about like the social capital and social wealth gap, that's what I'm talking about. So we provide different events and resources and things that also work to close that and connect folks. On the flip side, I also do HubSpot user groups. So these are all folks who utilize HubSpot. Some of them know HubSpot better than some of my coworkers, and they're here to help other businesses learn how to use HubSpot best for their business. So they get into that like niche area where like customer success is helping you learn the product, but our HubSpot user groups are helping you use the product for your customers. So those are kind of the two balances of what we do. So we have Black and Inbound, which is the main community that I run, as well as our HubSpot user groups. But mainly with Black and Inbound, especially, the nice thing is that it's been able to carry over into a lot of the work that we're doing at HubSpot. HubSpot has done a ton of work, and they like to say that we're walking the walk in terms of what we're doing for diversity, but we haven't walked the full trail yet. We're still doing work. We put out regular diversity reports. We have an amazing internal diversity team. We have myself, who's working on diversity externally with our customers and making sure that they feel represented. Last year, we hosted the first official Black and Inbound space at Inbound. It was in a main portion of our floor at our Inbound conference. If you walk by, you saw it. It was a huge sign that said Black and Inbound. We had a fully curated space where we got to just like sit down and talk about our experiences. And we had over 300 to 400 people that came through the space, and were just able to come in and say like, I feel seen here. I feel comfortable here. You come to conferences, and with the four of us on this panel, we would probably see each other immediately, but we wouldn't see anybody else that looked like us very much. And that was the hope, was that you just came into the space and you saw everybody that looked like us. And that's the work that we are doing. And it's great because everything we have to do is based off the conversation that we've had today. We're incredibly intentional about all the things that we're doing. Even within being a Black community, we are being intentional about the inclusion and diversity pieces. Like, I'm making sure that we have different genders represented. I'm making sure that we have different sexual orientations, folks from different backgrounds of work, and we're speaking to different pieces. We have different ages. We're pulling all of these things together, because it's not just like, oh, okay, we got a bunch of Black folks in the room. Amazing. We're going to stop here. We gotta take it further. And I want to hold my team accountable to doing that as well, so that the company continues to hold themselves accountable. So then when they reach out and they're like, hey, Shani, you have this whole community. Do you have anybody who has this? And I'm like, well, what's it for? What's this about? Like, I'm going to protect the community as well, to make sure that the rest of the company isn't just one-off using these stories and using the folks in the community for that. It has to be, again, proactive, a part of a strategy. They need to be able to explain what's going on, or else, no, I'm not going to tell you who's in my community. You don't get access to my data when it comes to that. So it's also accountability within the company. And it's really great because the company, from leadership down, like, I talked to our chief marketing officer, and he has time and time again said, in Shana, we trust. And he's like, if you feel like you need to do this, then we are here to support you. And that's where it has to begin. It has to start from leadership. I have regular meetings with our chief people officer, and this is not the case. HubSpot is like a 7,000 person company. That is not a normal case for us to do that, but they have been intentional about having these conversations with me and staying updated. And I'm hosting more meetings than my role would usually do, because people are interested in the work that we're doing and keeping them updated. So that's kind of a lot of the things. I just went on tangent because I got very excited.
I'm very excited about it. It's amazing. So, fun fact, Shana, I was at the first Black and Inbound.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's near and dear to my heart. It really is. It was
So you've seen where Devin, who's the creator of this and built it out, and then he actively was passed it along to me to take it on. And
I know.
it was
I'm
the
so
same
proud of
thing.
it.
The same thing when I met Devin, so Devin now works at HubSpot. He's a senior marketer at HubSpot, and he is, if you talk about a super fan, he
Oh
is the
yeah.
super fan of
Oh
super fans.
yeah. Mhm.
And when I got to speak to him, it was amazing to see the openness that he did. But basically, this man guerrilla marketed Black and Inbound years ago,
Yeah,
and used it
no,
as a
he
hashtag.
literally, he and Dominique Aubry literally walked around the floor, tapping us on the shoulder and having a conversation, and we all met for dinner. Like that was the beginning of it. So
Yep. And we have that first photo, and to see that grow and have not saying that this is going to happen for every company, but to be able to see this grow into something that the company has invested in and continue to build out. But it was also something where, again, that social capital piece, I was sitting talking to Devin, and I'm like, Devin, why don't you work here?
Yeah.
Like, you know more about HubSpot than anybody I've talked to. And this is my first couple months of joining HubSpot. He was like, it would be a dream. And within the next few months, I kept my coworkers aware of him and the work that he could do. And one day, finally, one of my team members was like, hey, you've been mentioning this person, and I think they would actually be perfect for this role. Can you introduce me to them?
That's amazing.
And that's how you get people in the door into the spaces that they are. And now he's in here doing the work that excites him, doing work that he should be recognized for. And that's what we should be creating spaces to do.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. Chris, I wanted to make sure you have some time to wrap up and kind of talk through your key messages today.
Yes, of course. And I see some questions in the chat. I hope we have time at the end to kind of.
Yeah, I think we should have time.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't share screen and see chat at the same time. So I appreciate you guys' help.
Yeah, of course. So hold on to your questions really quickly. I did just want to recap, the what not to do portion of what we talked about a little bit earlier. Of course, not having any diversity in your planning strategy or conceptualizing processes, not having the right people in the room. We've mentioned that a lot. Being culturally insensitive. Also, if you're in a position to kind of make those changes and make new norms, take full advantage of that. Nothing becomes normalized until those uncomfortable conversations continue to happen. And, people get tired of it or whatever, but things start changing after that. Also, ignoring complaints from open forums, such as social media or Twitter or things like that. People are complaining. Like, you have to be aware of what people are talking about online about your company, your brand, whatever it is. They're complaining about it. They probably have a hashtag about it. People get canceled every day. So pay attention to those conversations and make sure you're implementing some of those changes that can be made if possible. And just lastly, another shameless plug, if you're looking for any specific strategies or ways to map out inclusivity in your business approach, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure our contact will be shared out with all attendees after this wraps. But I do help businesses with social media management, brand strategy, graphic design, whatever you need.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I know we'll be sharing out the deck in the chat after the event. Alicia, do you want to take a few minutes to wrap up, and then we'll open it for questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what would be great to remember is, while you do get to start, and it is necessary, and it is a lot, don't let the magnitude of what gets to be done keep you from getting started, because you get to continually evolve and dig deeper, right? So we talked about where we are now, and Shayna set that up at the top of the conversation. But when we think about where we've come from and where we still want to go, get started. Don't keep putting it off for someone else to do later. And as you get started, feel free to dig deeper. So as you start to get images of people of color, then think about, colorism, and making sure that you're getting people that are of all shades within a specific culture. Make sure that you're getting people of different ages and abilities and orientations, and cover as many bases as you can, so that people feel seen and supported. And, when Shayna was talking about how it is that we can identify people in a conference. All of us here on this panel have had that feeling. So the more we talk about it, the more we create spaces like Shayna said they're doing at HubSpot so that those things are undone, then the less and less we have that feeling when we walk into a conference, right? So it gets to start somewhere, and think about it more as an opportunity than as a burden. I even in language like to say get to as opposed to have to. So this is something that we get to do, right? We get to help the generation after us feel more seen, feel like they belong when they come online or in person or in an email or a text message. Like it's all opportunity. So lean into the opportunity where you can and how you can, and obviously get those people in the room that can help you create those authentic conversations and pay them, to Shayna's point. And then keep evolving those plans. Like this is a living, breathing process. This is not a stale document that you get to say, okay, we've done it and we can check that off of our to-do list and move on to something else. This gets to be integrated, and hopefully, you know, this team is built out in your company over time. These efforts are grown and you get to collaborate with other people and other companies doing the same work. So I would really just encourage everyone to think about diversity, inclusion, belonging as an opportunity we get to lean into, because this is the world that we're actually living in, right? Like we're getting to a point where our kids will not have had the same experiences that we have had. And so we get to be intentional about what we're giving them on purpose from what we did get, which is being proud of who we are, sharing how to get along with more and more people, but also give them something that we didn't get, which is being able to show up to a space authentically themselves and immediately feel welcomed and seen. And so I love that we're having these conversations. This is a great place to start. Seek out resources, seek out voices, and do this work. You know, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so I have the first question. I'm just going to read the whole question from Gemily. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. In one of my PR classes back in college, one of my professors did a whole class on making an apology when you've messed up. She gave a really simple formula that can be expanded on depending on the situation. I'm sorry, plus I hurt you, and plus, and this is how we're going to do better. Do you agree with this? Who wants to take this one?
I'll just jump in really quick because I was talking about sincere apologies earlier. I think this is a great formula. I apologize. I know that I hurt you. So acknowledging that other person's pain, and then this is how we're going to do better. I think this works in life and of course in branding. I think it's important. I think it's important to use those spaces to be transparent. I want to say Alicia said transparency and accountability earlier, and that's what we're talking about. Too many of these brands are messing up or making blunders, and like we mentioned Pepsi on our planning call, and we don't even need to go down that rabbit hole, but I don't remember an apology. If they did, it was kind of like, yeah, sorry. And then they never followed up. And it's like, okay, what changes are you going to make? How are you going to show up more authentically next time? Now that you know you've hurt this group of people. So I think that's a great formula. I think that works.
All right, next question from Donna. All my clients are from other cultures, China, India, Mexico, etc. How would you expand diversity to inclusion conversation to discuss immigrants? Who wants to take that, Alicia?
Yeah, I think as I was saying, you get to evolve your efforts, right? So if this is who your audience is, look for opportunities to include their experience in the way that you're reaching out. So if you're not sure about how to do that, or what triggers are making your immigrant community feel maybe unseen or undervalued, I would start with asking, right? So there are maybe different terms that we've used in the past to refer to the immigrant community that I won't even say here that shouldn't be said. So if there are things like that that are potential blind spots, like we keep saying, you get to start with listening and find out what are the ways that your community, your audience would like to be seen. And I think that's important not to skip over, because being seen for people who have historically not been seen, or even worse, been told that they get to hide in order to stay safe or be successful. Um, Being seen is important. So it may not feel like a big deal to someone whose history has always been out front and you've never experienced not being seen. But I would say really lean into the opportunity to find out how the audiences that you are directly communicating with would feel more seen, because I guarantee you when you start asking those questions, you'll get the answers around what would feel good for your audience. So start with asking, start with listening, be intentional around the steps you could take to work those things into what you're doing on a daily basis.
I also do want to come in and comment on like being careful about when we're using the statement of immigrant as well, because it sounds like you're working with clients of other cultures. So referring to them from their culture and not as like, oh, okay, if you're not from America, then you're automatically categorized in an immigrant. That's a very specific statement. So also being able to like identify your language around working with clients from your cultures and respecting that culture and not just lumping them into that. So I just want to be sure, I'm not sure if that's what was intended or anything like that, but I just want to be sure that that is also pointed out.
So yeah, I stopped at that one, but wanted to read the question. In the notes that we'll share in the doc, there's a listing of language considerations that could be helpful. My assumption is it's just an education thing, and we need to all keep learning.
Yeah, we get to.
Last minute questions. I didn't see any others in the chat. Tracy, did you see any others that I missed?
No, between the women and we really stayed on top of everything. It was
Okay,
great discussion.
Well, I just want to thank you ladies again so much. I really appreciate your participation in this conversation. And I hope that everybody kind of continues to discuss it and feels comfortable discussing it openly, because I don't think that we're going to see changes until we can have open, clear conversations about it.
Yeah, thank you for creating space for us to have this conversation today. I really feel like it will be a helpful starting point to some people, and for others, a helpful way to continue, efforts that they've already started. So I just appreciate anytime someone is intentional about creating a space for a conversation like this, and especially when it ends with action items, so to get started, not just keep talking about it. It's much needed. So thank you for facilitating.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. We love you for this. Yeah, we needed this conversation, and thank you for the attendees for showing up or for sharing links on your social media, whatever you did, because this is what the work looks like, for that change to happen. So thank you to everyone.
Yep, this was a great conversation. The comments, the openness, appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
And thank you again, ladies. Unfortunately, the beginning was cut off for the introduction. So Jennifer, if you can just give a once more over where all of these amazing speakers can be found so that we catch that on the recording.
Oh, sure. One moment, please, and I'll read it over. Do you want me to just read their social media handles?
That would be great. We included it, I included it in the chat, and I know it will be in the doc, but I just want to give a great shout out because this is so important and they honored us with their time. So I just feel like it needs to be on the recording too, because I know some people just listen while they work. So I want them to hear it.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
You can reach Christian Gatlin at linkedin.com/Christian Gatlin Atlanta. Shayna Summers at HubSpot. She can be reached at HubSpot.com. Alicia Brownell, she can be reached at Alicia Brownell. Let me start that one over. Alicia Brownell, she can be reached at Alicia Brownell on Instagram or at Seizworthy. That's SEIZE Worthy. And me, I can be reached at linkedin.com. And this is not right. And me, I can be reached at linkedin.com/Jennifer Texada. Does that do it? And actually, let me go and do Shayna's again because it's out of order on the doc.
Okay.
All right. Shayna Summers from HubSpot can be reached at linkedin.com/blacketinbound.com. Again, one more time. Shayna Summers can be reached at linkedin.com/blacketinbound or Twitter/blacketinbound.
Excellent.
Is that enough?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the extra effort. I just want to make sure that we appreciate them in all of the ways that they can be found on this, because we also do it.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be a terrible clip together.
No, but we'll get it fixed. And thank you again. And I wanted to say thank you from Zoetica as well. And thank you, Jennifer, for hosting. You are a terrific host and we most appreciate your time.
Have a great day, everyone.